it was just awesome. Like the whole integration around it. And then even the digital out of home ads that we did, looking at New York and kind of mapping out people's walking paths from the Barry's Hotel that a lot of folks stayed at to the advertising week, and then even from Penn Station to the advertising week's location, making sure that we were hitting them along the way, coupled with the digital advertising that we were doing, targeting them. And then even arming our sales team with assets that they could reach out to those same prospects with. They were getting hit probably, 5 or 6 times with that creative, and it all tied together.
You're listening to the Revenue-Driven CMO, the podcast where we break down the most effective growth strategies from top marketing leaders. Join us every week as we dive into their stories, challenges, and insights that drive revenue. This show is brought to you by Level Agency, where AI-enabled performance marketing expertise blends the art and science of marketing to deliver measurable results.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Revenue-Driven CMO. I'm your host, Chris Mechanic, here with a really amazing marketer, a really amazing leader that I'm super excited to be speaking with. She's an experienced executive with a demonstrated history of building and leading high-functioning teams, but not just on the marketing side. She's got a really well-rounded background spanning sales, customer success, even revenue enablement. And she's just got a really great track record of launching and growing new products, new solutions, new business units, as well as just creating and implementing GTM strategies pretty much from the ground up. She's been in the game for over 20 years in digital marketing and advertising. She started her career at Centro, where she was working on the client solutions and the customer experience side of things. Currently, though, and for the last 6 years, she's been Chief Marketing Officer at Basis Technologies, which is a really exciting company in the digital advertising and marketing tech space. So I can't wait to get into it. But ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Miss Katie McAdams. How are you, Katie?
I am well. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. Really good to be here today.
Likewise. It's a Monday. It feels a little bit like a Monday, but
it is a Monday, and it's a Monday morning after Super Bowl Sunday too. So
I know. Yeah, we totally planned that.
Did more at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into it. We like to lead with the value. We like to go right for the good stuff. So why don't you tell us, what's one of your biggest secrets to success in marketing?
Sure. So that question there's so much pressure behind that question. Like, what thing, but, honestly, for me, I think a lot of it is something that I learned really just in the last year. So like you said, I've been in this industry for 20 years, but in the last year, I really learned that you just have to approach marketing in a very fearless manner. And I'll kind of explain what I mean a little bit about that. So, I work in B2B marketing, and what I've experienced throughout my career, and even just looking at some of the work that I've put out myself, is that a lot of B2B advertising and B2B marketing is very formulaic. There's not a ton of creativity there. There's kind of this formula of, hey, let's put a value prop out. Let's then back up that value prop with some sort of stat or data point that proves that we solved for that. And then let's push that out. And let's push it out all these different traditional tactics that when it comes to lead gen and generating a pipeline for our sales team. But what I found is that in the last year, if you lean into creativity in your advertising and you lean into that in a way that really sets you apart and helps you stand out from all the other competitors and companies in the B2B space who are kind of taking more of that formulaic approach, that you are going to be surprised at the results that you see. And that's something that over the last year I really did with my team is let's focus on, we work in the business of advertising. So my company is a platform for advertisers. Yet the advertising that we were putting out, it was really kind of what I would consider stale B2B formula. And what we decided was let's actually, in a really fearless way, lean into the creative side of advertising. We're marketing to advertisers, so let's put on advertising that we're excited and that we're proud of, and that we actually look at the creative and we're so excited about what we generated. And so that's what we did over the last year. We really leaned more into the creative when it comes to our advertising, and all the data points and all the different targeting tactics and all those things, they're all still really important. But I think that creative in advertising, what I learned over the last year, can be really the ultimate differentiator for B2B marketers. And I love that we're having this conversation the morning after Super Bowl Sunday, right? Which is like Super Bowl is the culmination of all the best advertising of the year. So I thought it was a really when I was thinking about it this morning, I thought it's a good day, good timing for us to be having this conversation.
100%. And I totally agree with you. I think somewhere along the way of all of this data flowing in, many people have lost sight of the actual creative, which is funny because if you go back in time, back to the earlier days of advertising, think about Claude Hopkins and, the legendary copywriters of the past, like they had some data, but they knew and they spent most of their time on the creative, like they did tons of research and they were deep into psychology of phrasing and, the way that you say things and the effect that it has on people. Like that was their 80%. And then there was like 20% data. That has gotten flipped over the years. And we have a saying in the agency, and excuse my language. I think I was telling you this before the show, but like we'll work really hard to put these amazing campaigns together, and we've got all the right targeting and all the right settings, and we've like allocated the budgets like perfectly across the different platforms. And one thing that I'll often say is like, let's not just shit out the creative, like don't just shit it out, like that's the most important part. So I totally agree with you, and I'm wondering, is there a formula for the non-formulaic? Like, in other words, like when you sit down to do it, like, are you just totally winging it? Or do you have sort of some rules of thumb or some like, some frameworks or some kind of, some sort of formula for the non-form or to be non-formulaic?
Well, so I think when I look at who we're targeting, so our core customer base is our actual CMOs at brands and then leaders of ad agencies. And when you think about why we chose to get into this industry, we didn't get in this industry to sit and look at Excel spreadsheets all day and crunch data. Like that's really when I was in college and I was thinking about potentially working in advertising or marketing. That was certainly not what I pictured for myself. And I think that the majority of people that we work with in this industry, it's something similar, right? Like we kind of romanticized what it might be like looking at like the Mad Men days and thinking that that's really what it's like to work in advertising. And then you get out of school and you start the job. And for me, I started actually as a media buyer. So I was sitting in spreadsheets all day, right? And it's really hard to be creative when it comes to that. And I think for us, thinking about, and I'll talk a little bit as we go into this, but thinking about the campaign that we just did last year, which was about getting back to kind of the golden age of advertising, thinking about those Mad Men type days and kind of what all of us romanticized about when we were thinking about working in this space. You know, my formula really to the team was actually just as simple as the way that we're going to get someone's attention is by showing them something that's unique and that speaks to them. And so if it's unique, if we don't see it out there elsewhere and it speaks to them, then that's a great starting point. And from there, then, come back to me with some ideas. I think when it comes to working with your creative teams, so in this case for me, it was my content team and my design teams, you don't want to give them too much of a formula because these are really creative individuals and I don't want to put limitations around what is possible. So I think as long as you're really at the core of it, remembering who the customer is, who the audience is, and what might emotionally connect with them, that's a good enough starting point. And then let people go off and come back to you with some harebrained ideas. Or harebrained ideas. Some of them, it's like, no, this is not going to work. But there's going to be some like good nuggets in there too.
I feel you on like, don't bog down the creative minds with rules. Um, in my experience though, like we have some frameworks or some go-to things like what you call unique, we'll call that a pattern interrupt. So like a pattern interrupt, like if suppose it's a video and like the very first, 2 seconds of it is like, like somebody's hand and they're squeezing slime and the slime is like going between their fingers, right? But it's just like go very quick, less than 2 seconds. Like that's a pattern interrupt. It's like, whoa, what is that? Like, I don't see that every day. So that's like unique, but like another, sort of framework that, works for me. Like, I don't know that our clients have allowed us many times to go deep into it, but humor always wins with me. Like if there's an ad that's funny, like, I'm watching that ad and I'm probably going to be remembering that product.
There were a couple commercials on the Super Bowl last night that stood out to me. And I think one for that very reason, right? There were some good pattern interrupters. And then there was one for I think actually Coors Light, their whole case of the Mondays at. I'm like, the fact that no beer company has thought of that before, like let's write Mondays on the front of a beer and call it case of the Mondays. I mean, it was brilliant. And I think that's a good example where sometimes just one line of copy can inspire the whole campaign. Right? So it could even just stem from that. Sometimes it starts with the design, sometimes it starts with the copy, but there has to be that inspiration that then people kind of spinning off on that to come up with a larger concept.
Yeah. Was that real, the case of the Mondays? I thought that was just like, are they actually going to be in the stores?
I don't know. So I think now next time at the grocery store, I'm gonna look to see. But if it's real, I think that's brilliant.
It would be brilliant because think about if you're in the store and like there's the regular Coors Light and then, or was it was Coors, right? Yeah, the regular Coors Light, and then it's like a Monday and you see the one that says Mondays on it. Like I'm totally buying that. I noticed that I want to get your take on this. So there's a sort of a spectrum of ads, one being on like the pure brand awareness, like, hey, we're GE, like we make the world better. No call to action, no offer, whatever. The other side of the spectrum is like a hard nosed, punch you in the face kind of offer. I was surprised last night to see that there was a lot of offers coming through. Like Starbucks, I think was like, come to Starbucks, get a free tall, or 10 or 210, 25, get a free tall coffee. Like that's like a hard nose offer pretty much, designed perfectly to drive. So I was sort of surprised to see that.
Which is interesting, right? For a B2C commercial during this. But I think it's speaking to maybe where people's heads are at, right? Like people might be concerned about the economy or financially might be struggling. And so let's figure out something that's going to connect with them in this moment based upon what's relevant at this time. And that was probably a good example of that.
Yeah. What other commercials do you remember?
I actually, and this is going back to your pattern disruptor. There was a commercial where it was reminding women to go out and get screened for breast cancer. But the commercial for the first 30 seconds, we were, the heck is this? Because pattern disruptor, right? Well, it was a lot of close-ups of women's chests, and we were like, "What? This has got to be going somewhere," But it got everyone in the room completely to stop talking and just watching to see what this was going to be. So that was memorable, and I think that they did what they set out to do, which was get you to pay attention and then hear the message at the end, right? Like, don't walk away, don't tune out during these 30 seconds. Wait, see what the build is for. So I thought that was a really good one.
Do you remember who that was? Was that it was some hospital system, I want to say?
I can't remember actually who it was for. If it was for a hospital system or if it was for just like breast cancer awareness. But yeah, that was another really good one.
That was combining pattern interrupt with sex, right? Sex sells.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like sex pattern interrupt. Oh my goodness. Everybody's eyes were glued to that.
Well, the men in the room are watching it and they're they're watching it maybe for very different reasons than all of us are watching it, right? Like all of the women are in the room like, the hell is this? But then once it got to the end, I'm like, okay, it's a great message and it's a great way to get people's attention. The ones that usually, and you and I were talking about this a little bit, but I'm a sucker for the tearjerker, like sentimental commercials. So there was one, it was for Nike, and it was about for girls flag football. So made flag football like an NCAA sport officially. And that one, that was kind of one of the, it wasn't a tearjerker, but it was more of like a spine tingling. So I think you kind of get all the different, you get all the variety, right? You get the humor, you get like the sentimental ones, the tearjerkers, the ones that are going to kind of make the hair in the back of your neck stand up. But that's a good example of where no matter which of those it is, it's speaking to you and connecting with you in an emotional way. And I think that's where, like, if you can do that, it's probably going to be a big campaign.
Totally. Yeah. There was one tearjerker that got to me. I'm trying to find it. But I think it was I am a somebody or I am someone.
So it was Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yeah. I was like tearing up.
It was actually for the NFL. And that one, I was tearing up during that one too. So, I am somebody. It was I am somebody. And they showed Big Brothers, Big Sisters, working with kids. And yeah, that was another really good one.
I really like that. My kids like that too. They were really engaged with that one.
Really?
Yeah. But another thing that you'll notice, and this is a really, probably just like a general best practice in video ads. But a lot of folks when they're doing video ads or commercials and video ads are very similar, right? They tend to take a little bit longer with things, but like humans, we can process imagery really quickly. So like with the breast cancer awareness one, like you'll notice it was really quick cut. Like there was no one single cut that was like more than a second or two. Like it was just cut and left, cut and right, cut. And that, psychologically, I think humans are wired. Like if something is changing a lot, like we're wired to sort of keep our eyes glued to it. I'll tell you one other that I really liked. It didn't make the list of the top 10, but I think it should have. Was for Hims. Do you know Hims?
I do, but I didn't see the commercial. No, I didn't see it.
It was toward the end, and I own their stock, which is like exploding right now, because, and most people just think of them kind of like as an online pharmacy, but they continually articulate this like bigger why about like big pharma, and they don't have our best interests at heart. It's too expensive, and it's too slow, and it's and so they're like, hey, we're taking down big pharma. It's like this sort of David versus Goliath theme. But their spot was really interesting. It was like, the first, I think it might have been longer than 30 seconds, but the first like 75% of it was just all about big pharma, like not taking us in or taking people into their best interest. And it used like visual pattern interrupts, like stacks of cash, or like a really big fat person, like squeezing their belly, like up close, like hairy belly being squeezed, kind of like all types of really powerful imagery, at the beginning. But again, just that quick cut style, like cut it quickly from a chart to like a, like really interesting visual.
Well, I think because they're a smaller brand, right? Like they're not a big drugstore brand. They're leaning into that too. Like people like the underdog. They like the smaller guy. They want to stick up for the smaller guy. If they feel like they can do that, like with their pocketbook, then I think people feel maybe a little better about their purchase. So I think that's another good example, like a strategy of if you're the smaller guy, if you're the lesser known brand, like lean into that. Because there's going to come a day, hopefully, if you're successful, where you're no longer that guy. So, lean into it while you can.
Totally. Yeah. And they did something else, which was really cool, which I think galvanized their audience or their followers a little bit. They're really active on Twitter. And apparently like the pharma lobbyists were sending to, I guess, the FDA or something, like these really strongly worded letters saying like, don't let these ads run, basically.
Really?
Yeah. And so they basically, turn that on the lobbyists by taking bits of the letter and highlighting and publishing it on Twitter and saying like, yo, and they have whatever it is, 100,000 followers. And they're like, guys, make this go viral. Like they're trying to shut us down kind of thing.
That's so smart, right? And yeah, people want to root for the underdog. That's why I think everyone was rooting for Philly last night. I don't know if you're a Chiefs fan, but
I'm not a Chiefs fan.
where I was, everybody was rooting for Philly. Just not even, they weren't even a Philly fan. They were like, I just don't want to see,
Right.
I don't want to see the Chiefs have a third-year win.
Right. That's exactly how I felt. Yeah. Everybody loves the underdog. So that's a really good play. Like, I don't know if it's called a framework, but it's like, hey, like with a creative team, once we do a lot of creative. I wouldn't call us a creative shop necessarily, but most creative shops, I would imagine, have like some book of themes or angles or frameworks. Like the David versus Goliath would be an angle. There's other angles like, hey, it's so easy, like ease of use could be an angle, or like, hey, everybody is doing this. Like if you're the big dog, you could overwhelm with credibility.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the underdog is great for challenger brands, and even on the B2B side, it can work too, right? Like the reasons you would work with the underdog are a lot different than the reasons you're going to go with the market leader. So instead of shying away from those things and the fact that maybe you are the smaller player, lean into them and use them to your advantage.
So I totally agree with you that many B2B ads seem pretty stale, pretty formulaic. Even there might even be like multiple different variations of different ads for different products or different content pieces that all look the same, like not a lot of visual diversity. I think in your position, since you're targeting like marketers and advertisers, it makes a lot of sense to sort of push the envelope. But what advice would you give to like a B2B in a sort of a more conservative space? Like suppose that they're selling to CFOs or, CISOs or like into compliance teams and things where it's like, definitely nobody got fired for hiring IBM kind of thing, right? Like you don't want to be all that different necessarily. Like what advice would you give to those marketing leaders to like get the space to test things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because it's a risk, and there's some fear associated with doing something like that you're going to be investing money in. For me, I'm somewhat lucky that I have in-house, I've got a really great design and content team. Now, I do, when we're doing larger campaigns, I do partner with an external agency too. But if you are someone who's got internal design resources on your marketing team, I think the best thing to do is come up with a few concepts internally first, right? So yes, that costs time and money with using an existing team, but if you can kind of start there and use that as a place to generate some new ideas, and then I think looking at how you get that buy-in and have other executives who maybe are an important part of the process, really see and understand like what you're trying to do and get their feedback too, right? Like I've experienced, so before I was in the marketing position, I was more of an internal customer marketing, right? Like I was leading customer success teams and sales divisions. And I think the worst thing that marketing teams can do is go off into a conference room, come up with some great idea, some great strategy, and then try to come and shock and awe everyone and be the hero. And I've never seen that go over well. Like I've never seen, or I have this pop-up keep popping up on my screen. I've never seen that go over well. And, you're not going to be the hero if other people's fingerprints aren't on it, because people want to feel like they're part of the process. And we just as human beings have a tendency to like things better if we were a part of the creation of it. Like, and everybody wants to take a little bit of credit. They want to take a little bit of credit for what that end result is if you end up creating something really great. So lean into that and have other people be part of the process, because I think that's where, as a CMO, if you can get your CFO on board with investing in ad creative, like that's a really good position to be sitting in. And they might be more interested in doing that if they're actually part of the process and they can get feedback along the way. So I would say that's probably my first piece of advice is, if you want to try to test some of these new things, if you want to push the envelope a bit on the creative front and do something that's a little less kind of formulaic B2B, get the other stakeholders involved early and get their feedback in the process and do it in a more of a low risk way where you're leveraging internal resources versus going out and hiring that big agency. Because with a really great seed of an idea, and then you get the buy-in of the right folks, you can go out and hire those additional resources, to help turn it into something bigger if it makes sense. So that's probably my number one is don't try to be the hero. Don't go off into a dark room and come back to shock and awe everyone. Get them involved early and be a great collaborator.
That's good advice. That's really good advice. Cool. Well, I love that. Let's keep talking about this, but I want to hear about Basis a little bit. And for folks that aren't familiar with it, like, can you tell us a little bit about it?
So we've been, so we actually, I heard you as you were doing my intro, I was at Centro before. We rebranded Centro to Basis. So we started at Centro and then we rebranded to Basis about 5 years ago. And I've been with the company really since almost the beginning. So when I started, there were 3 of us working around like an IKEA table in a windowless office. And, our CEO and founder is still the CEO of our company. And we've been in this space for over 20 years. So we're a advertising automation platform for agencies and brands to really help them run their advertising more efficiently and drive better performance. We also have a services layer for customers who don't necessarily have like a full digital media team in-house, so we can help supplement with services. But yeah, we've been in this space for a long time, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great. I never thought 20 years ago I'd still be sitting in the same company, but being in the space that we're in, like things change so quickly that it feels like the same company in a lot of ways, but then also obviously has changed a lot over the years.
Wow, that's incredible. So, and it looks like per LinkedIn, you have 1,400 people right now, roughly?
You have around 1,000 people. So we're headquartered in Chicago. We've got folks all over the US, Canada, Central and South America.
And you were employee number 3.
I was employee number 3. Yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I was interviewing at various companies, and my dad, who's an entrepreneur, actually gave me really great advice, which was at the time I was 24, and he's like, "You're 24, like go work for the startup. If it doesn't work out, you've got plenty of time to go find something else." So I took advice, and here I am 20 years later.
Wow, that's incredible. So yeah, I didn't realize that. But geez, so you went account manager, director publisher development, VP channel sales, SVP publisher development, SVP client solutions, EVP customer experience, and then chief marketing officer. Interesting. So you weren't actually in a marketing role until you became chief marketing officer.
No. And it's kind of a funny story because I'm not a traditional marketer. I didn't grow up in a marketing team. I was, again, more of an internal customer of marketing. And what happened was our previous CMO left the company, and my CEO asked, "Hey, in the interim, while we're trying to find a new CMO, will you manage the marketing team?" And so I started managing the marketing team. And at the time I was running customer success, and we were in the process of building out an implementation and onboarding function. So that was I was all in on that. But the timing of when I started managing as an interim, I'll call it interim CMO, we were also in the process of bringing our platform to market in a self-serve point. We had really been offering mostly managed services. And so I got so ingrained in the go-to-market for bringing that product out, which was probably the biggest product launch, definitely the biggest product launch we'd ever done as a company. And it was actually great because it tied in so well with what I was doing on the customer success side, right? Because customer success is such a critical part of bringing a product to market too. So I got so ingrained in it and I loved it. And so the product launch went really well. And eventually my CEO and I had a discussion, and he's like, do you want to do this, full time? And I was like, I actually do. Like, I love it. So, I've always said to my team, a lot of them came up through traditional marketing functions. I'm like, you guys are the day-to-day experts. And what I can bring to the table is I know our industry really well. I know our customer base really well. I know this company. I know how to navigate the company. And I think I'm pretty good at building teams at this point. But I need you guys to bring all of the functional expertise to the table. So I learn a ton from them, and I'm lucky I've got a team of people who is just so good at what they do. And then it allows me to do what I'm good at. So it's a really good balance.
That's awesome. And as you think about your time in the marketing seat, are there like any landmark campaigns that you did? Maybe it was like the initial self-service product launch, or like, can you tell us a story of like a real winning high impact campaign?
So yeah, I'll tell you about, the one that's actually the most recent and that has been going so well that we're actually now continuing it into this year. So this was, last year at the beginning of 2024, as a company, we pivoted to a larger ICP. So we started really going more enterprise. That up to that point, we've been really servicing more of the mid-market. And so pivoting to that enterprise customer base, all of a sudden the target audience that we were going after became a lot smaller. We had a much smaller list of customers that we were, working with the sales team. And so we sat down and we thought, how, going back to what you and I were talking about with the creative and being a creative disruptor, and how do we get the attention of this audience? And my CEO came to me, and he actually had this kind of harebrained idea, which was he wanted to run a TV commercial, which again, in our space, ad tech platforms, you don't really see them running a lot of TV commercials, first of all. But on top of that, he wanted to do a TV commercial that was unbranded. So we didn't even say who the company was. And I was excited about it. And I brought the idea to my team, and the first reaction was, that's insane. That's a huge waste of money. Why are we going to put like paid media dollars behind something that doesn't even have our name? But we ended up actually taking that kind of seed of an idea. And this is going back to, again, where once you get people involved and you kind of take this collaborative approach and have other people put their fingerprints on it. Once my team actually started kind of taking that seed of an idea and then starting to work with it and put their fingerprints on it, all of a sudden I started to see people get more on board with it and more excited about it, right? And ended up turning into the campaign that we launched last year, which we called the Golden Age campaign, which was really designed to tap into what you and I talked about earlier, which was the reason that a lot of us, I think, got into this industry to begin with, was because we were inspired by all of the nostalgic, Mad Men era types we saw that we thought was going to be our lives when we started working in this space, and quickly realized that it wasn't going to be. But we thought, how can we tap into that and really speak to this? This was for agency owners. How do we really speak to ad agency owners? And so we ended up doing this Golden Age campaign, and it was probably the most expensive campaign we've done in terms of the production and the creative that we produced. We ended up spending a lot less on the paid media than we usually do, because again, we were targeting a really specific audience. So we were able to kind of take that overall budget and really weight it much more heavily towards the creative and put out something that the production value was on par with what you would see from, I think, some of these like Super Bowl commercials. Like the production value was incredible. But there was a risk involved in that, right? Because we had to put dollars behind it to have it turn out that way. But we ended up running this campaign, and we called it the Golden Age campaign. And it featured first a 15-second commercial where the lead character, who was a female ad agency owner, spoke directly to a camera, and she was dressed in like 1960s style clothing in an office. And she said, I used to hate working at an ad agency, but now I love it. All thanks to, and then it cut out. It was just static.
Oh, wow.
So that's in terms of something that's like a disruptor. You're watching TV and then all of a sudden, first of all, let's say because we ran this through CTV and we actually geofenced the home addresses of over 1,000 agency execs. Yeah. And so imagine you're sitting in your living room and you're watching Hulu and then all of a sudden you see that. And first of all, you're like, wait, did she just say ad agency? They get you to perk up. And then all of a sudden, so you're like, okay, what is this? I want to know more. And then all of a sudden it cuts out before you even hear the company's name. And then there's static. And so the static part, that's the disruptor piece, right? But we then followed it up. We ran that for 2 weeks and then we followed it up with the continuation of that thread, which was then her turning to someone and explaining why she now loves working at an ad agency and how leveraging our platform has made them so much more efficient and profitable. So we started to tell that story in what I would say was a pretty risky way by not having that branding in there, but then did a quick follow with the 30 to 60-second commercials that ran after that, kind of continuing that story. So
That's brilliant. The geofencing of their home addresses is brilliant.
yeah, that was cool. And it was, a lot of research and my team just getting, Googling and getting addresses. And, maybe some of the addresses were wrong, but that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as majority of them were right, I'm okay with it. And yeah, I think just having someone see that in their living room and hear ad agency, if they work at an ad agency, it's going to stop you in your tracks.
Totally. Yeah, that's definitely like a good hook, at least. That's brilliant.
There was a tie into the campaign too, though, on the event side. And I think this is what was really cool was the commercial itself, the production quality was great, the targeting was great, but we wanted to make it a fully integrated campaign. And so advertising week is usually a big event for us in New York in the fall. And so we took over a space in the mall where advertising week is held. And we created a space that we called the Basis Oasis, which this was the third Basis Oasis we did in 2024. So at that point, you had a lot of the same people who had been at Possible in Miami, which was a big conference for us in the spring, and then Cannes Lion in June, and then advertising week. And at that point, now they'd been at the Basis Oasis at 2 other events. And so they kind of knew what to expect, which was we're going to create a really fun networking space with free drinks. There's always drinks involved at the Basis Oasis. And we're going to make it an experience. We're going to make it a place to be. And so the installation that we did at the Basis Oasis and Advertising Week, utilizing all the creative from this campaign, it was amazing. And I had people comment to me, this looks like an art installation. And think, our creative team was there. And so then hearing that, first of all, was like the highest compliment. But what they did was they took old Coca-Cola ad, and actually then turned it into a Basis ad. You're looking at it and you feel like you're looking at an old, ad from the 60s, but it was actually like a Basis ad.
That cool.
All of the different, photo assets that we had gotten from the Golden Age video shoot. And it was just awesome. Like the whole integration around it. And then even the digital out of home ads that we did, looking at New York and kind of mapping out people's walking paths from the Barry's Hotel that a lot of folks stayed at to the advertising week. And then even from Penn Station to the advertising week's location, making sure that we were hitting them along the way, coupled with the digital advertising that we were doing, targeting them. And then even arming our sales team with assets that they could reach out to those same prospects with. They were getting hit probably, 5 or 6 times with that creative and it all tied together. So I would say that was probably in the last 5 years since I've been in this seat, that was probably the coolest campaign we've done.
That's super cool. And what you did there, which is an opportunity that every B2B pretty much has. Maybe not every B2B, but anybody targeting a specific niche like ad agencies or Fortune 500 CEOs, you just created nearly 100% brand awareness, but among your little slice of the world, right? And I think it's largely due to the power of the targeting that we have these days. And because if you go back to those Mad Men era days, like there wasn't really a lot of ways to be able to surround your target audience with those messages. Like there might have been some trade publications, but a lot of even niche companies fell victim to this thing of like, we have to educate the entire market and just kind of really hope that our little slice of the pie sees it. Whereas like what you just described and the opportunity that's in front of a lot of the B2Bs today is the ability to get nearly 100% brand awareness, 5x frequency, right? And like 100% reach for, much, much less than it would have cost you otherwise.
Right. And then you can invest, instead of investing in wasted media, you can invest that money back into the creative.
Right.
And we use our own platform to run all of the media. So we were leveraging our own internal resources in that capacity too. So I used the marketing team, obviously. We had an external agency work with us on the video production. And then we used our own platform to run all the media and do all the targeting. So we were able to utilize a lot of in-house resources, which I think also made it really effective. And it got people internally excited. I think that's one thing that, especially in B2B, if you're supporting a sales organization, you have to remember that campaigns are not just for prospects. They're for your existing customers and they're for your internal teams. And it's got to kind of inspire across all three of those areas. Because even customers, we had so many customers who come and would stop by the Basis Oasis, right? And we've already won their business, but we're trying to keep their business every single day. And I think that seeing the kind of things that we were putting out, there's a sense of pride, like, oh, this is my partner. And they were impressed at what they saw. So I think just remembering that too, and getting people internally excited, don't lose sight of that, because otherwise I think you're missing an opportunity.
I was in San Antonio recently and I went to dinner and I was sitting at the bar and there was this young bartender. He must have been, 22, 23 years old. And he's like meticulously like doing this like fancy drink martini. He's like making sure that the glass is totally clean on the outside. And he's like garnishing it so carefully and everything. And I'm like, wow, man, you really take a lot of pride in your work. And he looks up at me and he goes, there's a reason that we're Michelin 3-star rated. Or he didn't say that. He was like, there's a reason they won some award. He was like, there's a reason that like we were voted best in San Antonio for 3 years in a row. So like, but that, marketing and PR effort really did affect his view of the place that you were.
Yeah. Like the pride that he took in that. Right. And I think it's a good example too of the consistency. So you just in that, like, let's assume that all the rest of the service you got throughout your whole meal was also that amazing. That consistency, if you don't see it throughout, you kind of lose a little bit of trust. You lose a little bit of trust in that brand or that restaurant or whatever it is. And, if we look at, I love that old adage of with marketing, you have to have like the fireworks and you have to have bonfires going at the same time, right? But the fireworks, once they're gone, people forget about them. And to be the great creative is like the fireworks, right? Like you got to get their attention. You want to stand out. But then what are those kind of bonfires that are constantly going that you're feeding that are creating that consistent thread for your customers and your prospects so that they trust you as a brand and they trust what they're going to get, whether that's the level of service they're going to get from you or from a marketing team. That's the quality of like the content and the resources that we're putting out, making sure the messaging is on point across all the different touch points, that we've got the data points to back up what we're saying. Those are kind of the bonfires that as a B2B marketer, you have to always be feeding. But to be then looking at the fireworks, like those are the things that get people excited and paying attention. And that's what gets the internal teams and the sales team excited and paying attention too. They feel like they have that air coverage to go out and feel proud about the brand that they're representing.
Love that. Well, hey, we're running out of time here. Last question for you. It sounds like things are going amazingly over there and you guys are really killing it. What are your big challenges or what's keeping you up at night?
I think right now, coming into the beginning of 2025, I think for a lot of people has been pretty turbulent, pretty disruptive. And I think for me, honestly, it's keeping in mind that how I approach things with my team, I want to be extremely empathetic and thoughtful to what people might be going through and might be experiencing. I think a lot of people have fear right now around some of the things that they're seeing and, changes that are happening, and balancing that with the fact that we've got a lot, on the work front that we've got to accomplish and get done. We've got big goals, every year there's the expectations just increase. But how do you push people and inspire people and, push them to deliver great results while also being mindful that some people are going through a lot, and you need to make sure that you're staying empathetic to that, and understanding. So I think that's probably, we're early in 2025. So ask me that same question in 6 months and I might have a different answer, but I think just based upon kind of where I'm sitting right now, what I'm seeing, that's probably the number one thing that keeps me.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, hey, this has been awesome. I've been inspired. I'm thinking about going and documenting 10 angles just as thought starters. For folks that are listening, if you have learned anything here today, if you felt inspired, pay it forward, share this with a friend, or drop us a comment or a 5-star review wherever you get your pods. We always appreciate that. Katie, for folks that would like to learn more about you or Basis, where would you direct them to?
I would direct you to www.basis.com. I think that there's a lot of also great resources and information on there if you check out our resources section. But this has been a great conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Stay on the line just 1 second. We'll wrap up. But for everybody listening, that was another awesome episode of Revenue-Driven CMO, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Revenue-Driven CMO. We really appreciate you being here. For more details, show notes, past episodes, head over to revenue-drivencmo.com. This show is brought to you by Level Agency, combining AI-enabled performance marketing expertise with the right mix of data and creativity to fuel growth. Catch you next week.